biggest thing that people overlook when it comes to club fitting?
So I suppose a good one would be the adjustability of the woods that you've already got. So I'm trying to save people some money here.
Love it.
Sometimes we can get what you've already got into a better window by just changing some of the settings on the head. Obviously, I appreciate that's more of a woods and hybrids kind of thing, but that's a good one. Grips would be another one.
Yes.
You know, if the grips have gone a little bit smooth, a little bit shiny, we're gripping it tighter. Tension is a killer of technique, as we all know.
So today we have Ali here to talk about club fitting. Now, Ali, I was going to bring this up without telling you, but we go a long way back, don't we? So do you remember the first time we actually worked together?
I'm going to say that was when I was on work experience at Aldborough.
Yeah,
and that is more than half my life ago now. So that is a long time ago.
It's mad. You came for a week of work experience, and I remember us completely clearing out like a wardrobe essentially full of sort of old golf equipment, and you're awesome that week. Fast forward to today, you do a lot of club fitting. You fitted me for my last set of irons, which was awesome, and I really want to get you on just to kind of have a chat, share your wisdom and expertise. So we want to talk through a lot of sort of custom fitting, get through some myths, and give some real good advice for golfers. How did you get into, I suppose, club fitting and equipment? Because whenever I speak to you, you've got this like Rain Man memory of like shafts, weights, what they do. Where did that come from as a passion?
Well, first of all, Will, thank you ever so much for having me. Really, really delighted to be on the podcast. I guess in terms of my first experience of fitting would actually have been on the other side of it. It would be as a player when I was growing up. My later teens as a junior, into my early adult years, would have been receiving fittings. I didn't, like some people, I didn't start my PGA course that early. I started when I was sort of mid-20s. Obviously, as part of your PGA training, custom fitting and equipment tech is something that you touch on and have some exams about. That would have been my first exposure. And then I guess it's, you jump into the real world, don't you? You kind of do your first fit at the golf club where you're working. And I guess it goes from there. So I suppose in a nice way, I've seen how fitting has evolved over the last few years with tech and with data. I suppose, how can I put it? Like, I'm a bit of a geek, right? I quite like how different shafts and heads can change things. They look similar and they can change the ball flight for someone. So I enjoy that challenge of it, of, you know, working with an individual on the day and their preferences and what they want to see and what they want to improve, and being able to play around with bits and go, here, try this or try that. And, you know, hopefully we get towards a nice pattern of shots at the end of it. So I suppose that's my background, really.
That's awesome. And I think that's it. It doesn't solve everything, but if you do get some equipment that really suits you, it can be one of those moments in golf where suddenly you can gain 10, 15 yards, or suddenly the golf ball's much easier to get up launching in the air. So it can be a quick win, can't it? Yeah,
it's a way of making a very hard game slightly less hard, isn't it? You know, ultimately.
Yeah, so where I want to start is just kind of give sort of, for most average golfers, an idea of, well, you know, how much can they gain, or what do you tend to see when people come for a fitting? And then I want to dive into sort of the specifics of round driver fitting and irons. But yeah, what do you see in your day-to-day?
It can vary. That's the absolute honest answer. And it can vary for a number of reasons. You know, if you've got someone, for example, that hasn't probably been fitted before, they've got equipment that's quite old, then you'd like to think that, you know, when you see that person, it's like, well, we should be able to make some good gains here, both in terms of sort of the launch numbers and the distance numbers, the speed numbers, all of those things that come with modern tech. We should be able to improve for them. But, you know, of course, sometimes you see some people that maybe have relatively more modern equipment, and it's smaller tweaks that you're looking for, maybe to try and get their dispersion a little bit closer together, or to give them a more consistent shot shape. And so there can be different metrics upon which you base the gain, as it were. You know, and as I say, some clubs that people have got, they will have molded their swings to a little bit more. Some people, you see, it's just plain wrong from the outset, because maybe that's just what they picked up to get started with, and it's not really what they need. It is probably a broad spectrum, and you have to go into things with an open mind as a fitter as well. But yeah, it's lovely, obviously, when you can help people and they make these big gains, and it's a very easy decision for them at the end, isn't it? So yeah, that's probably how I'd see it.
Yeah, and I think particularly with the data, so with TrackMan, GC Quad, and those tools these days, it isn't really a sell, is it? It's just, well, look, here's the difference, and it's 10-yard gain, or 3-yard gain, or this change in dispersion. Is it worth it? And it's kind of back over to the person. So I think it's a really nice time to be a club fitter, because it used to be very challenging to be able to sort of say, well, yeah, this is going a lot further, and why that is.
I mean, you think back to when fittings were done 15 years ago, and it was literally by eye, wasn't it? It was like, well, that looks a lot better.
It was by eye, and I remember being on Albury Golf Range, hitting 5 balls with a certain mark on them, and then 5 balls with a different mark on them, and walking down and seeing where they finished. And it was like, well, how else are we really going to tell if this driver's going further? So I mean, it was a long time ago, but yeah, it's certainly a lot easier now with equipment.
It is, yeah, and I'm with you on and kind of what you said. It's not my job really to sell the equipment, although it is, but I feel like it's my job to give people the data and the information, and interpret it in terms of what they were looking for, and go, whether that gain is value for you, that's entirely your call, isn't it? But at least you've got the information there on which to make a decision. So I think that's really important in terms of how we get that across to people.
Nice. So let's hop in, because I want to give you a couple of examples, so people who maybe don't know what fitting process goes through, we can run through that, and then we're going to get into some questions. We've got some great questions from people as well, so we'll get through those.
Fantastic.
But the example I was going to give you, if that's okay, just so people can get a feel of what this is, and obviously you need to go and get fitted to get your own numbers, is my dad, who I think you may have met a couple of times. He plays at Woodbridge. He plays off 21 handicap, and these days he's had a couple of tough years. He struggles a bit in terms of distance. He's got a little bit of a slice off the tee. He then hits one straight left, and he probably hasn't been refitted for his clubs for a good 2-3 years. So, if someone's coming along and they're struggling to make the carries, they've got this little bit of a slice, but they can also hit it left, which I think is quite common. Where do you start with someone like that, and what would a driver fitting look like?
So I think, well, I guess all fittings start with questions. So, as you say, we've got a little bit of a two-way miss going on there at the moment. So I think my first question would be, well, which one is the predominant one? Which one is getting you in more trouble? If it's the left to right shape that is maybe the more common theme, that's the one where we're losing more balls, then I'd probably be looking to try and take that spin off of the golf ball, and then looking to see what can we do if the carry distance is an issue. Why is that? Is it because we're hitting down on it? Is it because is it purely just a ball speed thing? Is it a combination of things? And what can we do to try and help your dad in this case, get a ball flight that is more controlled, stays in play a little bit more, because that's the first and most important thing, isn't it? And then if we can get it going out there a little bit further, then brilliant, which you'd like to think you would. If it's cutting that much and you can take the spin off the ball before you factor in ball speed, it should be going further, shouldn't it? So that would be my initial thoughts.
Nice. And then what does it look like? Is it then hitting a few shots with his current club and just getting some benchmarks?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's certainly something that I like to do. Again, going back to, I suppose, what we talked about of, we want to present the customer with the data, and for them to make an informed decision, they need to see what theirs is doing first. So the nice thing with TrackMan is you can obviously tag things up by group, so by different club, by different setting. So I would generally start with driver, tag it as own driver, hit some shots. You've got obviously a group of data there that we can look at. You've also got the dispersion on the screen, so we've got that to go against. And then I would usually at that point, as you say, let them hit 5 or 10 shots, obviously having had a warm up before. Once we're happy, we've got some representative examples of what they normally see. That's probably the time just to kind of pull them in, show them a few bits, see what we've got on the screen, and then try and highlight areas that we think that we can improve on, and see where we can get it to. So that would be my approach as well.
Nice. And then do you, as they're hitting shots, have you in your mind got an idea of, okay, we could try this club, we could go here, because there's so much choice these days? Or are you quite sort of brand agnostic and you can kind of fit them based on what brand they're kind of interested in?
I guess during that process where they're hitting a few shots and you're asking them a few questions, I'm building up a picture in my mind of what direction potentially we need to go in based off of what they've got now and where we want to get them to. So yeah, I will have, bearing in mind we fit 3 brands here. So I know some places probably fit 5 or 6, bigger establishments. But I've got in my mind, okay, right, what is going to be suitable? What equipment do I need to introduce? And but some people will be quite brand loyal. It's like, right, like I really want the Ping G440. Well, fine, that's okay. That's fine. We'll work with that and try and get it to where we can. If we really can't get anywhere with that, but I think there's something that's, for whatever reason, going to do better, I'll ask the golfer whether they'd be interested in trying it as an alternative. So, I mean, I'd always encourage people to be open-minded, but, we have to respect that everyone's different. Some people will like, they've maybe had a brand in the past and they want to stick to that, and that's fine too. Yeah.
And then on that same question, do you have any struggles with golfers not liking the look of a club, but it's performing well?
I can certainly understand the issue that I wouldn't say it's something that comes up a huge amount, just in my practical experience, purely because I think people generally want performance first and look second. But, it does happen from time to time. And again, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? It's just trying to work with the golfer and see what it's like anything. It's like, I suppose it's like buying a house, isn't it? You never get everything exactly what you want, but you compromise on certain areas and hopefully you end up with something that you're happy with. So it doesn't come up a lot, but of course, we try and work with people when that is the case.
Nice. And then I suppose for hopefully helping some people understand if they want to go for a fitting or not, no one can afford to, and they probably want to get some advice as to what they're looking for. So what about the numbers? So if they've got access to these numbers, what are they trying to do to understand if their driver is near optimal, or if anything's in mind? Can you sort of shed any sort of, I know it's going to be high level because you want to have them in person, but what are some key numbers for golfers to look at based on, say, distance and then dispersion?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, just to touch on your point regarding, golfers having fittings and investing in their equipment, we appreciate that it's a big expense. So, and it won't be for everyone, but for those that are considering upgrading their equipment, we think it's vital that they do, because, ultimately when you're spending that much money, you want it to be well spent. So that's the first thing. In terms of numbers, so obviously, again, it is relevant to the golfer and what we want for them. But the nice thing with like TrackMan is that you've got tools on there as well, like Optimizer. So whether it's iron fitting or whether it's a wood fitting, a hybrid fitting, a driver fitting, we can show them what theirs is doing and where those numbers need to get to basically optimize the flight. So if we're looking for optimal carry in total, for example, in, let's say, I don't know, they're launching it at 13 degrees with 3,500 spin, but they've got quite high ball speed. We know that that's spinning too much. So we need to look at what we can do to bring that spin down, as an example. In terms of more generally, I would say the main things that I look at with iron fitting in terms of data would be, actually spin rate is a really, really important one, because I'll always explain to people that, look, yes, I would like to find you something that goes further than what you've got. Yes, I would like to find something that, has good ball speed, but I also want, when you hit a good shot, that it lands on the green and it stays on the green. And I also want that when you hit comparative shots, that they go a very similar distance, because that's how you're going to build consistency and how you're going to get better. So spin rate's a really important one. And then again, I guess you know all things you're looking at, a launch as well, trajectory, peak height, ball speed. Those are going to be sort of the main ones, really.
Super to hear. And then I suppose I was going to go through, say, an example for iron fitting, but is it kind of the same type of process in the sense of, starting with the questions?
Fitting, I would say, is a slightly longer process, actually. There's a little bit more to iron fitting than there is to driver fitting, in my opinion. Some people might disagree, but I guess you've got more things that you could customize on an iron. So, my process for iron fitting is generally going to be length first, get the length right, because it's relative to how consistently they can strike the ball. And without kind of a consistent strike, it's very hard to read the other data. And also just your pleasure of playing the game. If you can strike something more consistently and nicely, and you see good flights, then that's obviously really, really important, isn't it? But yeah, so start with length. Once we've established length, then we can look at lie angle, because that is that has a direct impact on direction. So those would be the two things that you'd start with, really, with irons. And then I guess it's looking at where the golfer is in their golfing journey, what they are, where they are sort of ability wise, what type of head technology is going to suit them, and what we need to try and get the launch into the right window. And then you can start kind of playing around with shaft options and interchanging a few bits. At that point, you're then probably getting into looking at set makeup. So what irons you go up to, what wedges you go down to, how that fits in at the top end and the bottom end of the bag. And then I'll always kind of try and look at grips with people at the end and just make sure that they've got something that feels comfortable in the hands. Nice. So there's a little bit more to iron fitting, I would say, than wood. But, some of those things are still relevant as well.
Whereas with woods, is it more just trying to optimize that launch in terms of loft on the club and then shaft, and then kind of tweaking those two things to try and get it optimal and get it so that the person's happy with that and the ball flight?
Yeah, I guess you've got more that you can do with the head on most drivers now. They're all adjustable in various different ways. So whether that's, changing weights to change the directional bias, or whether that is, changing loft, like you say, the ping clubs, for example, have a flatter setting on. The Mizunos have an upright setting. So if you're trying to change shape of the ball flight, you've got a few more options in that respect. Whereas obviously an iron is an iron. You don't have any adjustability with it. So you've got to get it right there and then. So there's a little bit more difference there in that respect. But, length is still important because we've got to get them striking it correctly first. So it's just slightly different.
Nice. And I think just to wrap up this section, because we're going to get on to common myths, which I'm looking forward to next. Do you see some easy wins? And by easy wins, I mean kind of the thing that comes through again and again, and you just always think, oh, well, we need to do this with that golfer. Does that happen at all with drivers or irons?
I think this will lead into the next section quite well, actually. Loft is a big one for me.
Beat me to it, Ali. Carry on.
Loft is a big one. I mean, we're all programmed, I think, because golf has traditionally been played this way. Okay, well, I need a driver, I need a 3-wood, I need a 5-wood, a 4 iron, and so on and so forth. And the advent of things like TrackMan and data and what have you, and some very clever people out there, far cleverer than I, have put all this data together, and we see now that loft is quite often at a lot of ball speeds, and certainly for, and I hate to generalize here, and I really hope this doesn't come across this way, but for a majority of club golfers, it doesn't include everyone, but where ball speeds are relatively lower, we typically need more loft to optimize the carry and the flight of the ball. And so that would be the big thing. One of the things that jumps out the most is, people saying, right, I need a 3-wood. Well, we need a fairway wood, potentially, yes. But what loft that is, let's have a look. That's not to say there aren't people that, need a 3-wood in the bag, people that launch it higher or have more speed, very well, would benefit from that. But yeah, that loft is a big one, I think.
So normally they need more loft on the driver so that they may have 9 degrees, and you just know if you go 10.5 to 12, straight away there's more carry. And then a lot of people are coming in with a 3-wood with 15 degrees that they just can't carry far enough based on their club head speed.
Yeah, you tend to see the launch maybe just being a little bit on the low side, the spin a little bit on the low side, and of course the ball flight then is dipping out of the sky a bit too quickly. And so yeah, it's as you say, it's very data led, but you can see it with your own eyes as well. So it's quite nice, isn't it, when you give someone something and they go, oh, that's different, and they can see it, and then it's backed up by the data.
Okay, so next one I want to push your way, which we talked about quickly beforehand, is regular shafts. Shafts being too whippy, causing a slice. So do you want to explain why that normally isn't the case?
I guess it goes back to what a shaft does. Okay, so if we think of a shaft as something that under high speed, it bends and it bows. Okay, so I haven't got a shaft with us to show you, but generally the tip of it, the more flex there is doing that. So if you think of that through the ball, it's adding loft. If anything, the face is closing. So that is something that, like I say, generally, if it's just purely flex related, you'd probably more likely see it go left as a right-handed golfer or right as a left-handed golfer. Now, there will be instances where a shaft that is maybe too light or too soft could send the ball the other way. If you've got someone with a very quick rhythm, let's say the club's getting stuck behind them, then perhaps, yes, you might see that, but I would say left is probably more likely.
Yeah, and the general trend from hitting golf shots in lessons is whenever I've got a regular shaft, it's going left for me. I struggle so much to actually stop that draw and hook.
And absolutely. And so when you've got someone that is hitting that shape and they are sending it over left, and that is their miss, then that's probably, again, as a fitter, that's something that you're thinking about, right? Can I do anything? Have I got any options there with kind of, if the flight is already good, have I got any options there with maybe a stiffer flex or tip to try and stop that club head rotating as much to the left? And that's something that you have up your sleeve to look at.
Nice. Have we got any others you want to share in terms of common myths and things that people get wrong with clubs?
Not really. I think that those are the two main ones that kind of stick out to me, really. Yeah. I think those are the two main ones.
So we can go a couple of different ways here. We kind of have, I suppose, the general advice for different handicap groups, which is something that kind of came across. So again, it's tricky to generalize, but I suppose if we've got like a beginner or a high handicapper and they're like, right, I can get fitted for one thing, what would be the one thing would you suggest that they go fitted for?
I guess there's two potential answers here, isn't there? You could argue a putter, right? Because you're going to use that more than anything else, and it's probably the very easiest place in your bag to save some shots. So a putter potentially is a good investment. But then it probably depends on, if we're talking about, a beginner high handicapper that's not been playing a huge amount of time, but have been playing enough to sort of consider getting fitted, then you're probably going to ask them, right, what do you feel is the area of your game that is going to give you the biggest, what would gain you the most shots if we could fix that one area of your game? If they say, well, I always slice it in the bush, that's a bit general, but if I'm always kind of missing the fairway and losing a lot of balls, then you're probably going to go driver. Irons is generally always going to be a bigger expense, but when we're working with people with budgets, if they're, if they've said that, look, this is my budget constraint, this is where I am at the moment, then, and they want to look at irons, then we can, look at how we gap them to begin with, and then maybe they fill the gaps later on. So there are ways around it, but I say putter, then driver, so both ends of the bag, and then probably a bit in the middle.
I like that. And then does that change at all when you get down to sort of mid handicappers or low handicappers, or is it the same approach of, at that point, have some playing stats, look at where you're losing the most shots, and then work around that?
I think that's always, at any level, that is a good approach to take if you can, and if you've got that data available. Like you say, you're really looking for, golf is a game where I would say that your good shots are always good. Yeah, it's the ones that aren't so good that cause us bigger scores, isn't it? So what are the shots that are causing us more problems, and how can we address those first of all? So it's still the same thing, but obviously the fit might look a little bit different, and the conversations that you have might be a bit different, but the principle is probably still the same in terms of, particularly if you're working to a budget.
Nice, which kind of feeds into the next section. So yeah, I suppose a lot of golfers, they want to do this, but they're on a little bit of a budget. We know that new golf clubs are expensive, and there's a lot that goes into the design. There's a lot that goes into the marketing for a lot of these companies as well.
Yeah.
Should they always chase the newest model? Or, I mean, what do they do if they come to you and they say, like, I want some previous pings? Or how do you handle those conversations?
It's a conversation I've had a lot recently, because we are now early March. And as you will know, a lot of the mainstream brands, so your Pings, your Callaways, Titleists, etc., generally release new hardware sort of January, February time. And so, as I've said to a lot of people, look, this is quite a good time to come get fitted if you're working to a bit of a budget, because we have a lot of kind of turnover of new models and models that have just been superseded. So naturally, those models are still very good. If we can find something within our remaining demo kit, or even a new model that fits what you need, then that could be a great option. Look, I think we have to be honest with people that going from one generation to the next generation isn't really going to see an enormous gain. As well as the companies do it with their marketing campaigns, you're not likely to see a huge gain. And the reason for that is they're all pushing the limits of what's allowed by the governing bodies. They are all, they've been in the game for a long time. They know what they're doing. So it's incremental things that they're changing. And so if someone comes to me with, I don't know, a G430 driver and say they want to hit the new G440, of course I'll gladly help them. But am I expecting to gain them 10, 15 yards? Probably not. It'd be a pleasant surprise if we did. No, absolutely. Older models can be a really good option. And yeah, if it saves a little bit of money and we find something that fits the bill, then brilliant. That's actually a win-win for both sides, because it helps the golf shops as well, who probably need to move some of that equipment on. So yeah, it's a really good thing to look at.
Nice. So you sort of seeing my hunch is kind of 2 to 3 models. There might be a significant amount of change for golfers to go, oh, well, that might be a bit different for me.
Potentially, yeah. I think, if it's sort of 4 or 5 years old,
already,
then
you're not going to see much.
it's difficult to say. Again, it's our swings can change. People that are receiving coaching, that when they were fitted for their previous drive, even though it might have been 18 months ago, they might have changed things, and they might be in a different space. So it is very individual. But as a general rule of thumb, notwithstanding those other bits, then yeah, from one model to the next, I'm not expecting to see a massive gain, because they're all excellent products, and should last you for a few years, really. Not probably what the club companies want me to say, though. I will say that.
Lucky you're not sponsored by any of them, isn't it? It's,
yes. Yeah.
I think this is a nice thing. We get some good, genuine, honest advice. So with that, we've got some questions from some of the listeners, and then some rapid fires to wrap up. But I did want to ask you on that point, are there any clubs at the moment that you're hitting and you're fitting and you're like, oh, this is good. This is really nice. Is there anything that you really enjoy putting in the hands of people at the
I have to say the Ping 440 driver, really, really good. So that's the thing I love about that driver, is just how, what I would call, fittable it is. The adjustments that you can make on the head and the settings and the hosel, and obviously there's a few shaft options there as well. You just feel like, I don't want to tempt fate here, but you shouldn't really be able to not improve on someone's game with that. It is really good. It's really good.
like that? Well, I think you'll be 3 guests after Paul Wood, who's VP of Engineering at Ping, so he'll be very pleased to hear that. With this. So no, it's good to hear. And I have to say, this isn't sponsored by Ping, this show, by the way, but in Orlando, trying out the 440, the straight flight technology one as well. That's amazing for people that have a slice. Like, I'm so impressed how much you can actually get rid of left to right ball flight for right-handers with that club.
It is incredible. I remember doing a bit of testing with the previous model, the 430, the SFT 40, and when we were doing the data collection and hitting that SFT, and obviously we are and where the range is, and I hit a few over the pond with that.
Oh, that's mad. There's a long way left.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
with that as well. Are you seeing any innovations with irons? Because what we've seen in the last few years is that the irons have got stronger and stronger lofted. Pair that with putting the center of gravity lower down, which means that we get a higher ball speed and a good launch. But obviously, as you always talk about, that's a sacrifice on spin. So is that something that golfers need to watch for? And I remember you saying a couple of companies are doing something a little bit different to that now.
Yeah, so first of all, that is definitely a trend that's happened, and I understand why as well. It might be too simplistic to say it, but I guess nowadays a 7-iron, you can think of it as being a 6-iron. And that's not because it doesn't launch in a good window, but like you say, the spin is dropping because of the head construction the way it is. But they're, of course, ultra forgiving. And what you're doing is you're getting that power with effectively a shorter length shaft. So the consistency of strike for golfers should be better. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It won't work for everyone. If we've got spin that's too low, we're going to struggle to control our distances. That's going to make it difficult to improve. So we might hit some amazing looking shots. If they don't finish in the right place, that's not ideal. But you're right. There are now companies that are doing, generally with an iron series. I'm thinking of the new Callaway Elite as an example. You've got the standard Elite. You've then got the Elite X that's slightly bigger and more forgiving. You've then got the high launch, and the high launch option, Mizuno are doing the same with their hot metal. There's a high launch option. It's kind of a very similar head construction, but the lofts are slightly weaker through the set. And that is important for people that hit a low ball flight already. They need some help yes, we want the forgiveness and the ball speed and all those things, but we still need that ball in the right kind of trajectory window. So yes, that is something that I think the companies are mindful of now. And so there's a few more head options, available. The other thing to say about the stronger lofts is that I'm not against it, but what it has done is basically a lot of sets are not going to sort of 5 or 4 irons now, and they're often starting from 6s and 7s, but there's ending up being more wedges at the other end of the bag. And sometimes that can be confusing for golfers initially, and that's something that you have to explain. Well, look, now your pitching wedge in this set is 42 degrees. Even if we weaken it, your sandwich is 56. There's 13 degrees there. We've got to fill that. And maybe not just a gap wedge. Maybe we need 2 gap wedges, or an approach wedge and a gap wedge, or whatever you want to term it. So that, I think, as a discussion for golfers has been a little bit confusing. I try to use loft numbers to explain things rather than kind of tagging it with a name. So if our pitching wedge is 43, our next club might be 48, our next one might be 54, 58, however you kind of do it for that golfer. I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that the iron sets are still the same number of sticks, but the numbers on the bottom are different.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think it's really important. And just to wrap that section up, 4 degrees roughly between clubs, or stretch to 5? What would you recommend?
Yeah, it just depends on the golfer. With wedges, we always recommend between 4 to 6. And obviously, one of the questions you're going to ask people in a fitting is, what is the highest loft club that they want in their bag? Some people will say 60. Some people might say 58. Some people might say 56, just a sand wedge. And then you can try and, when you're doing your set makeup, you try and gap to that last club. So I think that's really important. The other thing is as well, for people, again, working on a budget, everything is done per club, isn't it?
Yeah.
At times, maybe we will stretch the gaps a little bit to try and remove one of those extra wedges. So you might go, well, with a pitching wedge, let's make that 44. So we'll weaken the loft of that. And then we'll get the gap wedge in at 50. And you do it that way. So it's just trying to make sure we don't leave people with a big gap. And where we can, we try and work to people's budgets.
Awesome. Great advice, Ali. Really good. I've got some quick fire questions. There were some good ones that came in. So
okay, do my best.
Really nice to hear this. First one, right on the money from Mark. Mark said, a fitting's a good idea for high handicappers, he's put 20 to 25, who might still be making small swing changes, or would this fitting be pointless?
Yeah, really good question, Mark. Really, really good question. And a conversation that I will have frequently with golfers here, particularly obviously people that I teach. I think that's a conversation to have with your coach, first of all, because they know your game best and what changes they're trying to make and what they're expecting how they're expecting that to change the ball flight, and then in which case whether the fitting is a good idea. The first thing I'll say is don't let ability or perceived ability be a reason not to have a fitting. That is one, going back to our common misconceptions. That is one thing that I hear a lot, is that I'm not good enough to have a fitting. And that's just not true. We can benefit all golfers. But yeah, when you're in the process of changing a few things technically, and then potentially that's having an impact on the ball flight, then yes. If there's small changes, possibly not. Possibly we can bear that in mind with the fitting that we do and try and build a little bit of future proofing into kind of what we spec you for. And have that conversation. But it's really important that you have that conversation with your coach as well.
Nice. And I think just to finish that up, it can work the other way around. If you get equipment that's easier to strike or easier to swing and you feel more comfortable, it can actually help, as you say. If you can future-proof it a little bit, then it can really speed things up with the swing change.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose a common one that I see from that perspective is length. If you've got taller people that have just got into the game and they've picked up some standard length clubs and they're trying to work on things, but their posture is pulling them quite far over the ball, that can really impact on their ability to make the movements that they want to make. So yeah, that's a really good point, Will. Yeah, really good point.
On that one as well, we're on to one of those myths. Tall people don't always need long golf clubs. What's the key metric in terms of static fitting for golfers? And then I suppose what's the process after that?
So I suppose a really good one for static measurement. Ping obviously have their famous chart, don't they? And so they'll take height and then they'll take wrist to floor measurements, so from the wrist crease to the floor of the glove hand, and that kind of brings us out on a chart of kind of where we are lengthwise and lie angle wise as well. Because yeah, we can be tall but have long arms. We can be short but have short arms. And all sorts. So it does vary from golfer to golfer. The other thing that I'll always say with the static fit, it's a great thing to do as a starting point, but it is a starting point. Obviously within different people's techniques, some people's maybe their spine angle changes, and that can change what we see on the color chart. So it's not an automatic assumption that, well, if you've come out with an upright lie angle with a static fit, that's where we need to be. There's other things that go into that, but it's a good start.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ali. I thought we might as well sneak that in there for anyone thinking, tell me, I'm 6'2". What do I need? Next question. It's another great one from James. So thanks for this one. He said, what basic advice can you give me for buying new irons for my 15-year-old daughter who is growing in strength from Golf Fitness and working on her swing to improve the solid strikes?
Yeah, really, really good question. And that is probably that age range of, I don't know, 12, 13 to 15, 16 is probably one of the trickiest fits that we have, because, as you've highlighted so eloquently there, at that age, our bodies are changing and we're growing, and we're our speed is changing, our postures and our heights and everything, they're all changing. So there's so many dynamic things there that we have to try and bear in mind. And, it has to be very much, especially when you're spending that sort of money, you don't want them to be right for 6 months. You want them to be right for as long as they can be. So it is about trying to, and being really open and honest with the golfer at heart there, and just say, look, we want to find something that is going to be okay for you now, but you're going to grow into it. So, that's where, length might be something that, well, actually, for now, you're going to grip down on that a little bit, but you're going to work your way up. The shaft, you might go a little bit heavier or firmer than what they need absolutely right now, knowing that that's where they're going to be in 6-12 months time, those sorts of things. But again, I'll go back to what I said to Mark. I think it was the first question. It's a conversation to have with your coach, because they know you best. They know the direction that they're going with you, where they think that you're going to be. So I think that's really important to have that discussion. But it's a tricky one, because there's a level of compromise that you need to try and get right there.
Yeah, and I think my personal experience, I was like 14 and had men's clubs with a regular shaft. They were just too heavy, and it really...
You can go too far with that as well, can't you?
Yeah.
So
it's such a delicate balance.
It is, yeah. It's trying to get something that's playable now, but it's still going to be playable in 12, 18 months' time. Yeah.
Nice, like that. This next one, if you can answer this, I'm going to be really impressed. So they haven't left their name here. I think it's a riddle. Does getting fitted with longer shafts, enabling more choking down, result in better striking control?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Look, if the shaft is longer than what you need, then naturally you're going to choke down. And if that's, I have come across people that like that feeling of having a little bit of the grip sticking out at the top. It gives them the feeling of more control. So that is something that I've seen. I guess ultimately we want to give you the right length, because if you're gripping in the right place, you should have that control anyway. So I think it's more of a how can I put it? It's more of a personal preference, that if I can say, we're still getting you gripping it in the right place. If you prefer to have an extra half an inch on top and you feel like you're gripping down and there's not a placebo effect, but it makes you feel more comfortable over the ball, fine, so be it. But yeah, absolutely. We want to give the right length, where you grip on that has a part to play. I actually had someone that's quite a low handicap come for a fitting quite recently, and I noticed that he was gripping down on his driver. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because he's quite a tall fellow. And yeah, we went a little bit shorter, but he quite liked having a little bit off the top there. So I didn't go maybe 3/4 of an inch shorter, went half an inch shorter. So yeah, that's a good question though.
Cool. Appreciate that one. I was trying to work it through in my head, I thought. And then nice one from Gordon. So yeah, it'd be great to get this. I was chatting to Gordon over email the other day. So he said, not sure if this is a suitable question here, but here it goes. Last year I brought a set of hybrid irons down to pitch and wedge. Enjoy them immensely. They're far more forgiving than my old irons. My question is, should I play them forward of center in my stance? I've noticed that they don't spin as much as my normal irons.
So that's an interesting question. Yeah, that's a good one. Obviously, a hybrid style head compared to an iron style head designed to launch the ball higher. And like you say, it's a great choice, full of forgiveness. And with that, as you say, they're probably not spinning as much. The head construction dictates that, but they're probably coming down from a higher peak height. And so you're possibly using height and trajectory to stop the ball more than spin, would be my first thought there. In terms of kind of where you position them in your stance, again, that's probably relative to your own golf swing. I would say that if I put my coaching hat on for a minute, where possible, I try and have people addressing their irons pretty centrally in their stance. Sometimes that has to change for various reasons, but I kind of like that consistency. I know that typically a lower lofted hybrid, you're probably going to have it just forward of center. But like you say, you've got a lot more loft there, and they're going to go quite high. If the ball comes back a little bit, what you're going to find, Gordon, is that your attack angle steepens ever so slightly. That might help you generate a little bit more spin whilst keeping the flight a bit more under control, particularly with the lower lofted ones. So maybe try dropping it back an inch or two.
I think that's perfect. That was my thoughts. Is really comes down to you still want to strike slightly down on those hybrids, but the key thing is put it further back in your stance and see how it feels and how that affects your ball flight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great golfers can play it a little bit further forward and play it a little bit further back, and they can hit good golf shots from both. Yeah, worth having a play around with. Nice. Are you ready for some little rapid fire questions to wrap up?
Go for it.
Okay. So this first one we may have covered a little bit already, but biggest fitting hack, or I suppose like biggest thing that people overlook when it comes to club fitting.
So I suppose a good one would be the adjustability of the woods that you've already got. So I'm trying to save people some money here. Sometimes we can get what you've already got into a better window by just changing some of the settings on the head. Obviously, I appreciate that's more of a woods and hybrids kind of thing, but that's a good one. Grips would be another one.
Yes.
If the grips have gone a little bit smooth, a little bit shiny, we're gripping it tighter. Tension is a killer of technique, as we all know. So making sure that the grips are in good condition. So there's a couple of bits there that hopefully save people a bit of money.
That's perfect. That really is. And then you don't have to give away their name, but have you got sort of a favorite success story of someone who came along and what they improved from their fitting?
Oh, that's a good one. I haven't got anything that's like an overriding one that's just standing out in my mind right here, right now. But what I will say is it's lovely. Obviously we're at a golf club, a lot of members that we see and that we try and help. And it is lovely when, they've gone out, they've tried something, they've come back and, a couple of days later that they're really happy with their new equipment. That's really nice. That's really satisfying to hear. So I can think of a few people we've fitted recently that have come in the shop smiling. Yeah, that's nice.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. It's so nice to chat to you and geek out over equipment. As we were just chatting before the show, you don't do modern social media or anything like that. So, yeah, where can people find you if they want to get in touch or come for a fitting? Where should we send them?
That's really kind. Again, thank you for having me. We're based at Halesworth Golf in Suffolk, not far from the coast. There's myself and our head professional, Richard. We're both here, very happy to help you. Our golf club social media account is at Halesworth Golf. So feel free to drop us a message through there. Or you can obviously go onto our website, pick up our email address and drop us a line. We'd love to help you.
Love that, Ali. Thank you so much, sir. I'll see you for a coffee next time I'm back in Suffolk.
It's a pleasure. We're looking forward to seeing you.